Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The VP debate last night kicked off with a discussion of the Middle East because, well, things are escalating there. You've had a failed Iranian missile attack against Israel just hours before last night's debate.
200 plus ballistic missiles.
And so the discussion was about, who provides the steadier hand when it comes to trying to prevent war and prevent America from additional foreign entanglements. And it also calls to mind the record over the last, say, decade of policy vis-a-vis Iran and Trump versus Joe Obama, the three terms of Barack and Joe. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, the animatronic Tony Blinken, on Meet the Press not so long ago, after insisting the weekend before $6 billion was unfrozen, $6 billion in Iranian assets was unfrozen in exchange for the release of 5 American hostages.
Yeah, wasn't he asked, will they be able to use it for terrorist reasons?
The
money, yeah.
He said that Iran was not used, that money was not used to attack Israel. But on Meet the Press, subsequently, he said this.
What do you say about the argument that money is fungible? So Iran may have known this money is coming and used other funds to help fund this attack that happened.
Iran has unfortunately always used and focused its funds on supporting terrorism, on supporting groups like Hamas. And it's done that when there have been sanctions. It's done that when there haven't been sanctions. And it's always prioritized that.
Right, it prioritizes that, so it's curious why you would finance your enemies, and this was the distinction, not quite put in these terms, that I think Vance tried to sketch out. See, we don't finance our enemies, state sponsors of terror like Iran. We take out their top general, as Trump did, Soleimani. We end this sweetheart glide path to nuclearization. And we stop sending them cash, as well as allowing them to ramp up their oil production, which has generated $30 to $40 billion estimated last year to do what Anthony Blinken says that they do, which is prioritize terrorism.
Well, what about the billions Obama sent to Iran before he left office? The pallets of cash.
$400 million in cash.
Yeah.
Total, and then the total was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 billion, according to congressional officials who were briefed by the State Department at the time. So, between the Biden and the Obama administrations, Iran has done pretty well. They were doing less well, I think it's fairly safe to say, during the Trump years. And this is sort of what repeats itself, not only how Trump dealt with our main enemy in the Middle East, that would be Iran, but also how he dealt with our main ally in the Middle East, that would be Israel, getting involved in brokering the Abraham Accords, these essentially peace deals between Israel and several majority Arab states. So that's a jumping off point. I mean, I know foreign policy is not as top of mind as what's happening to people's pocketbooks and what's happening at the border and how it is presenting itself across the country. But, as you get closer to America's more substantial involvement, it was mentioned last night, 40,000 troops have been deployed to the Middle East during the Biden years in one capacity or the other, which I'm sure came as a shock to Kamala, who doesn't believe we have any soldiers in harm's way. Anyway, as the drums of war are beaten, people's attention perks up. Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review, author of The Rise of the New Puritans, Fighting Back Against Progressives' War on Fun, joins us now. Noah, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So what about that exchange to kick off the debate and the underlying substance of the disagreement and distinctions and policy choices by the two parties?
Well, you opened by describing the missile attack yesterday as failed, and I'm not sure that's an accurate portrayal from either Iran's perspective or Israel's. This spectacular, historic volley of ballistic missiles, no country in the history of the planet Earth has fired that many ballistic missiles at one nation or another. And this attack managed to penetrate Israel's air defenses and produce a significant amount of impacts. The fact that it didn't produce casualties along with them is nigh miraculous.
Yeah.
Yes, there was preparation involved. Yes, there was the Israelis managed to detect this attack ahead of time in advance, get everybody to the shelters. For the most part, it's a free country. You don't have to do that. And a lot of people don't. The fact that these impacts were very close to, but not on their targets, like Mossad headquarters, like Israeli Air Force bases, is practically divine and lucky. And we absolutely have to take account of that. And the fact that Israel had experienced this act of war against it is something that it will not accept, and it will retaliate in probably a much more demonstrative fashion than it did in April, when that attack absolutely did fail. The April attack did not penetrate Israeli airspace, with some rare exceptions. So I would say that you have to give Iran credit for reshaping the geopolitical balance in the region in a way that Western powers and Israel cannot accept. And that's where I wished the debate would have gone, because we were in a new world as of yesterday morning after this attack. And the conversation took place in a time before that attack, pretty much on both sides, but for the most part, really, Mr. Waltz had the most maladroit performance there. Because as you said in the intro, and this is what I completely agree with, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Tim Walz, they are flat-footed when it comes to Israel because they don't have a coherent message. They are not saying what I think they believe. They're not articulating the American consensus. They're pandering to a very small, loud minority that doesn't accept the notion that Israel is America's ally in the region, and its Arab tormentors and the terrorists that harass it and kill Israeli citizens, as they did yesterday with 6 citizens who were shot dead in a cafe.
Yeah.
They don't accept that. Those people reject that notion. They want to recalibrate American geopolitical allegiances in the region. And they're not going to say that. Tim Walz and Kamala Harris aren't going to say that because that's not U.S. policy. But they're also not going to correct these people where they're wrong. So what comes out of Tim Walz's mouth is incoherent blather that makes no sense and seems irrelevant to the topic at hand because he does not know his own mind on the issue. And if he does, he's afraid to say it.
Well, the paradox is the promotion of Israel, sort of pro forma promotion of Israel as our ally, as the victim of a gruesome terrorist attack October 7th of last year, and the right to defend themselves. And then in the same breath, we're talking about the need for de-escalation. Seth Cropsey, who is a former Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy, writing in the Journal, offers this. In the Middle East, the Biden administration provides material to Israel, but it demands Israel accepts a ceasefire in Gaza, portrayed as temporary but inevitably permanent until Hamas violates it again, without attempting to resolve Israel's core security issue or Iran's growing power and malign intentions. As a result, Israel is frozen. Frozen in the minds of the administration. Obviously, Bibi is not accepting that posture.
Yeah, and I agree with Steph. He's very sharp. And what they're getting at and what the American policy should be in this region is to support Israel's efforts to get at the disease rather than the symptoms. The disease is Iran. Its terrorist proxies, the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria are all symptoms of that broader malady. The administration is deeply uncomfortable with escalation. It is afraid of escalation anywhere and everywhere. It talks itself out of engaging fully with its own rhetorical commitments to Israel, to Ukraine. If Taiwan were to be invaded tomorrow, the same effect would happen. They're desperately terrified of provoking their adversary, even as their adversary is engaged in provocative behavior themselves. And that's why we see so much escalation over the course of the Biden years, because they paralyze themselves with the frameworks that they talk themselves into. With Ukraine, it's very clear. And they invent red lines for Russia, and when those red lines are violated, they say, okay, well, nothing actually happened. Good for us. But it's 2 or 3 months later, past the point at which it's been valuable. You could say the same about all these weapons platforms: tanks, fixed-wing aircraft, cluster munitions, the use of long-range ordnance inside Russian territory. All of that begets more escalation. Why did Ukraine invade Russian territory? Because it's absolutely terrified that the Biden administration and the West is going to sacrifice it, go to the negotiating table and say, let's freeze the lines of contact here, wherever they are. So Ukraine needs a negotiating tactic in that play. It needs to have the lines of contact in places that Russia will not accept. If Ukraine had more confidence in the administration, maybe it wouldn't have taken that course, but it doesn't. Likewise with Israel. Israel's no longer sitting around waiting for the Biden administration to green light its efforts to secure its own citizens and its borders. Right. It's acting on its own.
Yeah, but did the United States, did they have indications that Iran was going to strike?
Well, hours earlier, like hours prior, that's what I saw. I saw the United States and Israeli intelligence leaking to the public, or saying to the public on the record that this was coming minutes earlier. And you could detect that movement via satellite. Say, okay, we have a lot of ordnance moving around here, and it's looking like they're refueling things, and this is go time. You can see that from space. And they may have shared that intelligence privately, but we certainly saw it publicly. But Israeli intelligence, it's good to have intelligence sharing relationships. The United States is a spectacularly efficient intelligence apparatus. But Israeli intelligence is pretty darn good, as we've seen for the last couple of weeks. So I don't think they're sitting around waiting for confirmation from Washington to see what Hezbollah is doing in southern Lebanon. They can see it themselves, and they have assets on the ground that confirm that as well. The overall picture, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just that the overall picture from this administration is one of indecision to a degree that emboldens our adversaries. And that seems like a really simple concept unless you've spent a lot of time, as unfortunately I have, in lecture halls, in graduate courses, in diplomatic institutions and talk shops, so marinating in the argot of diplomat-ese. All these simple concepts become hopelessly elusive and very and kind of, frankly, a little naive to think that powers are emboldened by a lack of action on the part of their adversaries. They respond to more complex incentives like that. You have to talk yourself into these conclusions that otherwise don't really make sense in the real world to people who have lived experience with other human beings.
Well, sure, and you don't need a JFK School of Government advanced degree to be confused when Anthony Blinken says, on the one hand, that the $6 billion we turn over, just a portion of the money that we've given Iran or assets we've unfrozen, that's not going to be used to attack Israel. And then the other hand says that, hey, they prioritize whatever money they have for terrorist activities.
I like how Kristen framed it as, what do you make of the argument that money is fungible? So there's like a healthy debate around.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. So in terms of the larger debate, I thought that, and I don't know, maybe they did. I thought Vance and Walz may go outside after the debate and throw the old pigskin around. They got along pretty well.
Yeah, they were very disciplined, both of them. It was not hard to see what they were trying to accomplish there, which is we have to soften our image with these voters, so we're going to be as soft-focused and as genteel and civil as we possibly can be, and worked. I came off. Both J.D. Vance was scintillating. He obviously outperformed his opponent, but on style points, I think you probably have to grade it right around even, because Tim Walz had to do the exact same thing and did it. I mean, he was excessively deferential. You talked to a Democrat this morning, and they're really depressed over his performance because they don't think he took it. He didn't take them to the mat,
right,
as much as they wanted to see. They wanted to see a combative, dismissive, hand gesture-y, very animated guy who would prosecute the case against January 6th, who would really prosecute the case against the cat ladies thing and the eating cats in Springfield. None of that happened, because that wasn't what the campaign's objectives was.
Right.
And you can tell that their objective was to make these people more palatable to the middle of America, people who might only see snippets of this debate in alternative news sources that none of us will ever see on TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, who knows?
Yeah, but
those are the voters who matter at this stage.
That cringy moment, when they asked him about his whereabouts, in Tiananmen Square. That was just probably the most uncomfortable I've felt as an American citizen watching a debate, whether it would be presidential or a VP debate.
Yeah, it was awful. And he should. Who knows why he doesn't have a tight 30-second response on that one nailed down, because you knew that was going to come up in the debate. Interestingly, and unfortunately for the American voter, that was the first time China had been mentioned in any of these debates. Even the one with Joe Biden didn't come up very much. Joe Biden, I think, introduced the topic tangentially. But we haven't really talked about China in this campaign, and that was pretty much it. And it was about an event 40 years ago. Regardless, that was his worst moment in this debate by far, and that's probably one of those clips that'll be circulating. And it wasn't really that effective in neutralizing what has become something of a miasma around Tim Walz, that he's a fabulist, that he's a liar, that he makes stuff up in his history, or at least inflates and exaggerates his own history in ways that are untruthful.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's stuck to him yet, but this one might have the capacity to translate, to broader audiences and really make that impression kind of sticky.
Well, the majority of Americans didn't seem to mind that Biden spent 40 years as a fabulist. So I guess Tim Walz thinks he could probably get away with it. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think a lot of conservatives are properly impressed with Vance, and he showed that he is an intelligent guy who is very poised and he's very good. You would expect those things, and if you've watched Vance over even just the last few years, you've seen a lot of instances of this. So he knew what he was doing, but so did Walz, and the Walz thing is to make him Jim Belushi from According to Jim. He's like a sitcom dad. He's Coach Walz, and he just in case you didn't know, he wove it in through 5 or 6 answers, and it's to make him non-scary, non-threatening. It's Paul Simon with the bow tie. I mean, that's that's what he did, even though he clearly doesn't have the skill set that J.D. Vance does.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if, for those persuadable voters who are, kind of marginal and don't really follow the news that much, that impression stunk. Like he sunk the hook on that one. And just because he didn't take the bait either. They were very cordial, and that was great. I think that's actually, good in the abstract for American politics, that we don't see these people at each other's jugulars every day, all day. But if you were actually paying any attention to the substance, there wasn't a contest there.
Yeah, right.
J.D. Vance wiped the floor with Tim Walz. And it's not because he wasn't prepped. He has a lot of debate prep. You could tell he was very well prepared for this event. It's that they don't have answers for the questions that they're asked. The questions that they're asked are about policies that are, under Joe Biden, are failures or mismanagement or a product of a highly ideological commitment to a set of factors that aren't really evident on the ground, and become very highly abstracted when you talk about them really quickly, because they're otherwise, they're elusive, and they exist in the minds of far left Democrats to whom this campaign has pandered. So it's not as though Tim Walz is a maladroit actor. He came off as maladroit on that stage because he's trying to sell a product that's defective.
Yeah.
It's just the beginning, middle, and end of it. This administration and its successor campaign are trying to retail things that are abject failures. So they're massaging them in ways that don't make a lot of sense, and they sound like a used car salesman, because
right.
They're trying to pitch you a lemon.
Right, which is, right. They're talking about, growing up in rural Nebraska as opposed to, what the details of this vehicle are. Right. I mean, it was, and I thought Vance was right to make sure people who were not getting it got it when he explicitly said, my buddy Tim over here has a very tough job to do. He's trying to sell manure-smelling air freshener. And so I really feel for him. Noah Rothman.
Just briefly, if I could.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why this was so cordial is because the fundamental distinction between Republicans and Democrats has been muted over the course of this campaign and earlier, and that is the fundamental role of government, whether government's intervention in private affairs is effective and desirable, and whether government is even capable of engaging in social engineering. That consensus exists across two campaigns. They disagree on the margins, but they both agree that government should be in the business of engineering society in ways they like. And that's why we see so few really raw distinctions on that debate stage.
It's an important and disturbing point from my perspective that you make, because I completely agree with that, which is why there was so much, me and Tim want the same thing. We're just trying to get to it from different ways. And, I agree with a lot of what Tim said. I agree with a lot of J.D. Vance said. It was troubling, actually. Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review, author of The Rise of the New Puritans, Fighting Back Against Progressives' War on Fun. Noah, thanks as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank, a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
I'm Scott Bartmus, co-founder of ESCO, a security and fire alarm services business, and a customer of Signature Bank. We work hard to give our customers peace of mind, so it's nice to know that while we have our customers' backs, partners like Signature Bank have ours. When COVID hit, there was a lot of uncertainty for many businesses, particularly surrounding the PPP loan program, with parameters and deadlines changing constantly. The executives from Signature Bank worked weekends alongside their staff, filling out and submitting applications to ensure they took care of us. That type of dedication is hard to find, but we found it with Signature Bank.
Signature Bank